don't love influencer marketing as a brand owner. Now, before you click away thinking I'm just another cynic in a sea of marketing gurus, let me tell you what I'm chatting about today. There's this idea floating around that you absolutely must have an influencer campaign or content creators waving your flag if you want to make a dent in the market. I don't agree, but we'll get to that. First, let's chat what the fuck an influencer campaign is, and then I'm going to walk you step by step how to create one, and I'll tell you why I don't like them. Kia ora, I'm Brianne West. You may know me as the founder and former CEO of Ethique, or ideally from my new startup, Incrediballs. Or maybe that woman who just rants about sustainability issues on TikTok. Or hey, you've probably never heard of me before. I'm here to help people build ethical businesses that change the world, because I've spent the last 10 years of my life doing just that, and now I'm starting a new one. Okay, let's set the scene. Who are we talking about? We throw around terms like content creators or influencers. Is there a difference? Yeah. Kinda. But unfortunately, that difference depends on who you talk to. This is what I reckon stands. Influencers are the folks who've built a really strong personal brand. So strong that their morning coffee routine will break the internet. They leverage their personal stories, their lifestyles, and, well, influence to sway their followers' opinion and purchase decisions. We're talking, sponsored posts, brand deals, everything you've seen on social media. It's their job to be influential. Content creators, on the other hand, are more about the content. They're the artisans of the digital world, if you like. They're all about quality first and foremost. So whether it's breathtaking photography or drawl-worthy recipes or binge-worthy videos, their main goal is to engage and entertain the audience. Monetization through brand collaborations or sponsored posts is part of the gig, but it's the cherry on the top. It's not the whole dessert. It's not the reason they do it. So you've got the difference between those two, but it gets a little bit more complicated because within influencers, there's tiers. You have everything from nano to micro to macro, and then global influencers. So nano influencers, unsurprisingly, are the smallest ones. These are the ground level of influencer marketing. Typically have follower counts under 1,000. They're the epitome of niche authenticity. They have really large engagement rates typically, and they have a highly dedicated, highly engaged small audience. That's a nano influencer. They have a level of intimacy with their audience and trust that's unparalleled with bigger influencers most of the time. Working with nano influencers is all about forging genuine connections, tapping into a tight-knit community where every share or comment or like is actually a personal endorsement. Micro influencers fit in that gap between 1,000 to say 10,000. They might not have the massive numbers of a global influencer, but their word is gold. Think of them like the local cafe. They know your order by heart, they're trustworthy, they're personable, they're engaging, and you have faith in them. Macro influencers are getting a little bit bigger now. These are the tens of thousands to potentially millions. They have broad appeal, they're potentially a little controversial depending on how they've grown, and they have the ability to reach a vast audience. Typically tend to be more polished, of a more professional veneer, not always. These are of course generalizations. Now of course you're talking global influencers. These are your titans of the influencer world. I'm sure I could rattle off a few names and you'd know who I was talking about. The global megaphones. Kim Kardashian, probably the greatest influencer of all time, is Taylor Swift. These can be tricky to work with. Bigger does not always mean better. A micro influencer with a really highly engaged audience can offer way more bang for buck than a global one with 1 million viewers, because it's all about engagement, authenticity, and the core audience. But we'll get to that. So when you're thinking about getting involved with influencers or content creators, you really want to consider who aligns with your brand and who your audience will connect with. It's not all about how many followers someone has, but it's how engaged those followers are. After all, a smaller, highly engaged audience can sometimes be way more valuable than a large but kind of indifferent one. You see this a lot when influencers launch a brand. The ones that succeed are the ones that actually have an audience that cares. Okay, you're comfy with terminology because it can get a little confusing. So let's crack into it. But are influencer campaigns really necessary? Well, there's this big theory that to really grow a global brand, you need a global ambassador, right? I don't think this is true. I have seen campaigns and brands with zero or smaller influencers absolutely smashing it, and that's because they were smart, they connected with people, and that's where they got results. You don't need a big name to make a big splash. What matters more is how you connect with that audience and how they connect with what you're saying. I mean, I have seen many brands completely waste time and money with A-list celebs who bring absolutely no credibility to their brand, yet cost the business several $million. I nearly entered into a contract like that myself. I'm so glad we stopped. Millions of dollars is an extreme example, right? But there is a lot of evidence out there that the bigger the celebrity, the less people trust them. So at Ethique, right, most of our big name competitors had a big name behind them as a brand ambassador, and we still outsold them. But don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that influencers and content creators aren't helpful. They are. They can give your brand a boost, reach new eyes, and they can add credibility if you do it right. So let's do it right. At the end of the day, they're part of a larger picture. Your brand story, your brand values, your authenticity, building your community, that's the key. Your influencers need to fit around that. And that connection between them and your brand has to be real. And it's just another ad people are going to scroll past. There are a couple of things you might want to consider before you leap headfirst into developing an influencer campaign. There are many things to consider, but let's keep it simple for today's purposes. Number one, do you want long-term or one-off partnerships? You need to think beyond the immediate campaign, right? While one-offs can be useful, spike interest, show you whether it's working, long-term build depth. They build that relationship, again, that authenticity and trust. You want influencers who can become genuine advocates over time. This doesn't necessarily mean locking in forever contracts, but rather you want to foster ongoing connections and relationships. I am a much bigger advocate for fewer longer-term relationships. I just think it comes across far more authentically if you choose the right influencer. So have a think about what will work for your brand, your budget, all those other considerations we're going to go into. Longer term, one-off, short term, there are many ways to do this. Something you will absolutely need to get right though is your consistent messaging. Consistency, we hear it every single day, but it's actually really fucking hard. This is where a brand Bible is really helpful, but if you're an early stage startup, you might not have one. I don't think Ethique had one until maybe 4 years ago. So if you don't have one, do up a really good brief. You want to ensure that your values and your story is encapsulated, but that it's flexible enough so it blends with your influencer style, because there's no point hiring someone for what you like about them and then changing that entirely, which you see often. Co-branding effort needs to feel like a mutual partnership, not a wedging a square peg into a round hole. You want to think about your diversification of those tiers we were talking about. So do you want a mix of nano and micro? Do you want a big macro? It depends entirely on who you want to reach and your goals. Each tier has its strengths, from high engagement of nano to mass reach of macro, and diversifying your influencer mix will help iron out some of those risks. You will need to tailor your message accordingly though. We'll get to that. You also want to pay attention to which tier performs best for you, because you don't know yet. This brings me to our last consideration, return on investment. You need to measure your success, because there is no point in doing anything if you don't know if it worked very well. You want to set out with clear goals, things like engagement rates, conversion rates if you're chasing conversion, audience growth, whatever it is you're chasing, make sure you have goals and you measure it. You can use analytics tools that track this really easily for you. And also chat with your influencers to see what they reckon. They know their audience better than you do after all. It's time to build a strategy. We're going to do this together, so grab a pen and paper. We're going to start with your goals. Jot down your main goals. What do you want this influencer campaign to achieve? Are you looking to increase brand awareness, drive sales, launch a new product? Be specific. Got that? Maybe pause the video, because this should take you some time. Next up is a budget, because here's my next controversial statement. You shouldn't send influencers stuff and expect them to post about it for free. Whether you like it or not, this is how influencers earn a living. This is their labor. You should pay them accordingly. Expecting content from them on platforms they have built regardless of the size, I kind of think it's a little unethical. If they want to, great, but you shouldn't ask that of them. And I think the worst culprits here are big brands. You want to be realistic about what you can afford, remembering that return on investment is key. You want to think about costs outside the influencer cost, like product costs or additional ones for travel or whatever it is. And obviously, because you're not going to know who you're going to work with yet, you won't have a super accurate budget, but just allocate what you can afford. Next, you want to create a profile of your ideal customer. Now, you already know who your core audience is, right? Oh, you don't? That's all right. We have a module specifically for this on businessforbetter.com. It is so critical you know who you're talking to. Otherwise, this campaign is a waste of time and money. The old 25 to 35-year-old female is a demographic, not a target audience. People within that demographic vary quite a lot. So what are their interests? What are their habits, their values? What do they hang out online? What are their pain points? What do they want? I promise this isn't just me being irritating. The more you know about the customer, the better you can tailor your campaign, the better you can tailor your marketing in general. And the better you can pick your influencer. Because that leads to our next step, influencer selection. This is probably the longest bit and the most arduous. You might already know the people you want to work with. That's great, you probably follow them. But try and be neutral. Assess them against the goals you've set, the core customer you've just created. If you want to talk to busy mums, is an 18-year-old makeup artist the best fit? If you want to gain sales, which means getting people to trust your recommendations, is a global influencer the best call? Arm yourself with research tools. Look on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, every other platform you want to be on. Don't overlook things like blogs and podcasts to hear them in their real voice. Make a list and then go through things like their engagement. Have a look to see if their audience respects them. Do they have comments? Do they have authenticity of interactions? Do they align with your brand values? There is a lot to go through. There are lots of tools though you can use to do this. Like Hike Auditor is what I use, but there are literally thousands, so just pick what you like, and a lot of them are free. Pay attention to engagement. That's the gold. And that is hard. It's a lot of work to select the right influencers. But if you don't do this, you may as well just throw the money down the drain. Okay, you have a short list, you have your goals, you know what you're going to do, now you need a pitch. Now remember, this is a partnership, and sure, you might be paying them, but you are asking them to sell their reputation. I almost never do paid partnerships. In fact, I actually can't think of one I've done despite being asked many, many times. I say no for many reasons. Most brands don't fit what it is that I'm going for, but I'm also just not really interested in being an influencer, I suppose. So I'm a tough pitch. So are most influencers. You need to sell yourself. They get bombarded with offers daily, so your pitch needs to stand out. You need to be concise, personal, personable, clear about what makes your brand unique and different. You want to talk about your values, what makes your brand valuable. And ethical brands, you have a real advantage here because you have a lot to talk about, right? Ultimately, I think people want to do good. So if you explain how your brand helps change the world, they're more likely to want to be on board. This is a two-way street. You want your pitch to say how you will benefit them as well, maybe not just financially. So some key points: personalize your outreach. No copy paste, or if you do copy paste, at least remember to change the names. Highlight what you admire about their work and any recent comments or posts or opinions they've had. It's always a nice insight that you've actually done your homework. And then clearly outline what you are looking for and what you're offering and what you want to achieve together. Once you've got their interest, fingers crossed, it's time to talk details. This includes compensation, deliverables, deadlines, creative limitations, creative freedoms. Transparency prevents misunderstandings, and that's what builds a strong foundation, particularly if you want an ongoing relationship. If you don't have the time or money for contracts, well, you might not have the money, but trust me, make the time. There are loads of contract templates that are absolutely free. Please use one. Be clear, be transparent. If you don't have clear guidelines and expectations from day one or both of you will probably end up disappointed. See the tan guy and the Michaela thing on TikTok? Great example. Massive eye roll there to both of them. Appallingly handled, easily avoidable. Anyway, don't be them. So you need to discuss and agree on compensation that's fair and reflects the value that you both bring. It's not a one-sided story. Define clear deliverables. Number of posts, number of stories, strategic messaging, and then 3 is deadlines. Agree on timelines, agree on approval dates, make sure everything aligns with the campaign goals. Now you can sit back and relax because you've done the hard work. Make sure everything's correct and right, and then watch the feedback roll in, see what happens. You need to give it a few days to see if it's working or not, but just keep an eye on things. Sometimes PR disasters come out of these sorts of things, and you want to make sure you're on top of it straight away. Most of the time this doesn't happen, but you want to measure everything because that will help you with your next campaign. So analyze your data. Did it meet your objectives? If not, why not? If so, great. But same question, why did it? And use those insights to refine your strategy for your next campaign. Now, I started this video telling you I wasn't a fan of influencer marketing, and now I'm going to tell you why. Most brands do it really badly. And I kind of think that's ruining the whole industry. Sure, people trust influencers more than brands, obviously, but the levels still aren't super high. And the bigger the audience, the lower that is. So if you do this wrong, it can be a huge waste of time and money. In worst case scenario, it can do a massive amount of damage to your brand. It can be really great for your brand too, of course, but only if you put the work in. But if it were me, I would allocate a lot more time and resource on building a community. That might involve influencers for sure, but it also involves things like hosting events or things like online webinars. Ask the founder, be approachable as a brand. But creating content that's valuable and resonates with your audience, not just buy my stuff. Try to inspire and entertain and educate them. You want to add real value to their lives because this is a relationship. You want to foster user-generated content and share that around. That's the gold standard. It's social proof. It's like reviews, but way better. It gives you authentic content, but it also helps share your brand story and shows that, yeah, you're real behind the scenes. Building a community means being active and responsible on social media, not just posting your own content, but sharing others. It's just about having real conversations. And it also means providing exceptional customer service because almost no one expects it now. And when you deliver, perfect. Great customer service equals customer loyalty, customer retention, and then they become massive advocates for your brand. And that is marketing you cannot buy. Importantly, it's about listening. So what does your community want? And then adapt based on their feedback. Your community is an absolute goldmine of insights that you can use to make your business better, make your product better. And that is how you improve and grow your brand. So yes, influencers can be a part of this strategy, and perhaps they should be, but they should be part of a larger, much more holistic approach to building a brand that people love and that they feel a part of. That's where the real power lies, and that's where the real influence lies, in the slow, steady process of building a community. Brands that focus only on influencers, and there are many, will struggle to retain customer loyalty. I hope that's provided you some insight into the influencer world and how to construct a campaign. I'm Brianne West from Business With Better, where I help people like you start and scale ethical brands that change the world. And our education hub is free. We're moving over to YouTube now to make it a little easier to access. So hit that like button and drop any thoughts or comments below. And we are here to listen and genuinely help businesses grow that change the world. And yeah, I don't care if that sounds naive. It's already happening. Thank you for watching. See you next video.